Okay. What do I think is the future of conservative politics when it comes to education? Well, I think the future of conservative politics, for instance, in the UK, when like a conservative party is at rule, is specializing or going in the direction of centralizing education or the centrifying of
I'm sorry.
education,
Everyone.
where you try to figure out how to neutralize both left wing bias and right wing bias, make sure that the education is like fair and doesn't end up alienating any political leaning. So how do you actually centralize education? I don't think that's a thing that's been done yet. Um, but like it's something that does need to be looked into with the aid of like think tanks, with like intellectual think tanks, with academics, psychologists, politicians, both left wing people, right wing people, because and that's one of the ways we should get balance is you got to have a balance of both left wing people and right wing people in order to find balance in the center. So we do need to figure out academically when conservatives are in power, how do we actually centralize education to neutralize biases so nobody gets alienated, so that one, religious people don't get alienated, and two, minorities don't get did I say manipulated? Um, Alienated. So you don't want to have any minority um alienated, and you don't want any religious people alienated as well. So you got to figure out how do you neutralize far left wing and far right wing bias, to meet at the center left and the center right to find balance in the center. And this is like path to agreement through the middle ground type thing is what I just explained. Um, because like when you have a greater distance to travel, so for instance, if you're at the far left end of the political spectrum, to travel all the way to the far right, because there's a greater distance, there's a bigger like force field or resistance as you travel. So in order to make the ability to find compromise easier, you got to bring people to the center left and the center right. So instead of traveling all the way from the far left to the far right, you just have to travel from the center left to the center right, which basically would lower the distance of travel by, basically 50%. So you'd basically lower it from like going from uh far left to center right, to center left would be 25%, and then lowering it from far right to center right would be another 25%. So you're lowering the distance by 50%. So if you have 100% distance, when you're traveling from 1 to 100, there's a greater distance and therefore greater resistance. So the way you get agreement is by bringing everybody to the center left and the center right, lowering the distance by 50%. So therefore you only have 50% of a distance to travel. So that means you're able to find compromise much easier because the distance is lesser. Um, I've explained that before in a video that I'm not sure whether I made public or not, but I figured that out for this video. But yeah, we need to figure out how to we centralize education. You can call it centralizing education, centrifying education, the centrification of education. Now, obviously, depending on who's in power, you'd have like either a left wing bias or a right wing bias. But I think that there'd be more leeway when there's less leaning people in power. And, I don't suggest that left leaning politicians, when they're in power, to go down the same route. I think that they're like, I want to say that like a liberal bias. So not a far left or progressive bias, let's say, but like a liberal bias is actually a neutral bias. And when you have left-leaning people in power, you want a little bit slanted towards the left. But this video is about what conservatives need to do when they're in power. They need to concentrate on centralizing education to make sure that nobody gets alienated of either religious people or minorities and stuff like that. Minorities don't just include LGBTQ people; they also students. It also includes like disabled students or students with mental health issues or students with learning difficulties or genetic problems like autism. So you have to balance between minorities and religious people. Yeah. Um, One of the ideas that I have is that when it comes to the flags that schools fly, is that the school itself should remain neutral, or that's the guidance and the conservative rule. Um, So when it comes to any individual flags, it's up to the teacher in the classroom. So the school itself needs to stay centralized, but the teachers should have the freedom to advocate for what they want to advocate for in class. Um, so that's, I think, how you solve like the little bit of like the flag problem. So like the school itself might not be under conservative rule, might not be able to fly the LGBTQ flag, the school itself. But the teachers, if they want to, they should be allowed to, because that's freedom. That's liberalism. Um yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to go into in this video about the future of conservative education and they and them needing to go down the path of centrification or centralizing education to neutralize both far left and far right wing bias to try and meet in the center left and the center right, find balance in the center. Um, yeah, so and then I wanted to go into like the flag idea as well, clarify to like recap, which is the school itself can't like shouldn't fly like any specific flag. Like obviously you can obviously because it's uh, British education. You're allowed to carry like fly the country's flag because the flag is meant to symbolize neutrality. The flag is meant to symbolize both left wingism and right wingism, both liberalism and conservatism. So the school is allowed to fly um, the normal flag, but only the teachers are allowed to fly specific flags like the LGBTQ flag. Um, yeah, so that's basically just the ideas I wanted to go into today. I didn't want to go into the full on how do you actually centralize education. I'm just trying to say, this is the path that conservatives need to go down. Um, I can't think of anything else to add. Is there anything? Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to cover today, and all I figured out. I think the reason why I can't go any further is because that's all I figured out so far. Um, should I do that? Patriotic education, how to get like I don't like patriotic education. I think it's kind of like teaching people, brainwashing people to value their country no matter what. But if, like, say, Reform UK wants to increase the likelihood of having that type of thing, which I don't think that stuff like that should be done. Like things that might be perceived as having a far left or far right bias shouldn't be really be just done by one party alone. I think there should be like when it comes to like creating like a free speech, like more free speech rights or something. that's something that shouldn't be done by one party, but all parties working together. Um, oh yeah, so if they want to get patriotic education, what they should do is they should do what they do in Wales. And when I looked it up recently, or in the last like few months or 6 months of the year, in the Welsh Baccalaureate, they actually do teach things like critical thinking. So when it comes to improving the likelihood of something like maybe not patriotic education, national baccalaureates, that's the word. Um, if reform wants to get that more likely to happen, they need to combine it with teaching things like media literacy and critical thinking, because they shouldn't be allowed to pass something that I think is perceived, right, perceived to have a far right wing indoctrination, whatever bias, right? So I don't think that they should. I said that now. One party shouldn't be allowed to do that. It should be something, right? If they want to improve the likelihood of having, uh, they should do it in the format of national baccalaureates. So like it'd be like a British baccalaureate or whatever. And if they want to improve the likelihood of that being implemented, they need to attach media literacy and um, critical thinking. Yeah, because you're not going to get just patriotic education teaching people to like worship their country no matter what. You're not going to get that passed on its own. You need to combine it with media literacy and critical thinking, because parties parties working together should not agree on just having patriotic education on itself. They should turn it into a British baccalaureate that teaches also critical thinking and media literacy. Yeah, because to neutralize patriot education, that would be centrification of education. See, so um, that's why you need to do uh, not patriotic education, but national baccalaureates with media literacy and critical thinking attached, because you're not going to get something like that passed without adding something that more liberal or progressive people are going to like. So yeah, not only should you teach people about your country's history or something like that, but you should also do it in a baccalaureate type setting, type format, sorry, with media literacy and critical thinking. And now I'm just repeating myself, so I'm going to end the video there.